Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. Viewers, we would like to welcome you to our program. Today, here we have with us Tariq Ali, a very prolific writer and a very wonderful orator. I mean, he doesn't need an introduction, but obviously that has to be there, and I have to introduce you because he's our guest today. So, we know Tariq Ali, he's got a very keen eye and an eye for detail on how politics and how issues in the world unfold. Today we'll be talking to him about the situation of minorities in Pakistan with special reference to religious minorities. Tariq Ali, I'd like to welcome you to the program first of all. Going straight to the topic, we see that the white patch on the flag of Pakistan denote, or is at least said to denote, the minorities of Pakistan. But the situation is that they're having to face a lot of difficulty and they're in an absolutely appalling situation at the moment. Where do you think things went wrong?
Well, I think things went wrong at the very beginning, if you want to know the truth. I think it took too long for Pakistan to fix up a constitution. India got one very quickly. It took us, we didn't have a proper constitution till 1956. So 9 years. In that time, the country was ruled by the civil service, with politicians bowing and scraping before that civil service. I think the fact that most of the politicians who governed Pakistan were people who had collaborated with the British in previous years meant that they had no sense of independence at all. And thirdly, and most importantly, I think the way in which the Pakistani governments based in the western part of the country treated the Bengali majority was so horrendous that it finally led to the breakup of the country in 1971. So a ruling elite which can treat a majority like that of its own people, what can you expect from it when it comes to minorities? And the treatment of minorities, I think, was fine till General Zia-ul-Haq came to power and Bhutto trying to make concessions to the right-wing populists in the country. The combination of these two things made conditions for minorities much worse. The big mistake Bhutto made, and I have written this many a time, that in trying to deal with the Islamist groups in Pakistan who were in a coalition, he thought he would steal their clothes. So he banned alcohol, he made Friday a public holiday, and one of the oldest demands of the hardcore Islamist groups was to declare the Ahmadiyyas to be non-Muslims. He did that. It was not done by the right, it was not done by a military dictatorship, it was done by Bhutto, probably the most liberal prime minister we have ever had. And that, I think, was a huge tragedy for Pakistan, because it meant you could never roll it back. That had been done. Zia then, after he seized power in 1977, decided that this phase of the country's life was going to be Islamization. And he said so. So laws were promulgated during his years against religious minorities, the blasphemy laws were made worse, and the rights of women were severely truncated under that regime. And since that time, things haven't got better, they've got worse. But look, now it's not only the Christian minorities who are being persecuted. I mean, when you have open clashes, you see, it has a logic that if you can't stand minorities which are non-Islamic, then you can't stand minorities which are Islamic.
Absolutely.
So you have Sunni fundamentalist groups attacking Shia fundamentalist groups, and the country is in a mess. It's not just the minorities, it's everything is in a mess.
Yes. Tariq Ali, can I ask you, looking at the constitutional amendments in Pakistan and the ordinance brought about, especially the anti-Qadiani ordinance as they call it, how do you see the difference? I mean, the clashes, sectarian clashes between like Sunnis and Shias and other sects, and the persecution with Ahmadis?
I think it's part of the same process, that you try and create a country in which there is only one orthodoxy, then everyone suffers except the people whose orthodoxy is accepted. it was very interesting that the judicial inquiry into the 1953 riots against the Muslims known as Qadianis in Pakistan, that inquiry showed how everything was orchestrated from the top by the Doltana government.
Yes.
And the judges asked different religious divines to appear before them and give evidence. And they asked each religious divine the same question: what constitutes a Muslim? And all of them gave different answers.
Yeah.
And the judges said, according to most of these religious divines, nobody is a Muslim in this country,
Yeah.
if we add that up. And it was a very effective report.
Absolutely.
Which should be studied. But, you know, things have moved way beyond that now. And I think that Pakistan, in order to recover, needs a revolution, to be honest.
Absolutely.
To change everything and to make the country governable and to make the country a country where all its citizens can live in harmony, in peace, and with social justice.
Yeah. So when we talk of revolution and when we talk of things and the situation changing in Pakistan, what we normally hear, a cliche, is Qaid-e-Azam ka Pakistan. Is it still 63 years on? Is it still relevant?
Qaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah's Pakistan finished on 1971. His dream was of uniting all the Muslim majority areas of the Indian subcontinent into a state and a smaller version of India. That is what he dreamed. But that was already slightly utopian, because if you're dividing the country on the basis of religion, then it's foolish to expect that a country modeled on that basis is going to keep Hindus and Sikhs there.
Absolutely.
But Jinnah was taken aback. They didn't think it through.
Yes.
And the British gave it to them too quickly as a thank you present. But they hadn't thought it through, and Jinnah was very shaken by the partition riots, which led to the loss of at least 1 million, probably 2 million lives. Shaken to the core by that. Then, in 1971, Pakistan broke into two pieces, and that was the end of Jinnah's Pakistan. So now you had a possibility that in both parts of what was once Pakistan, you would have decent, liberal, social democratic style governments. That never happened either. So the country is in a mess. Though I am in sympathy with Jinnah's speech to the Constituent Assembly in 1947. Now we are all citizens of a state, and it doesn't matter whether you are Muslims or Hindus or Sikhs or Parsis. We are all equal. Well, that was never implemented.
Absolutely.
You know, and who knows what would have happened had he stayed alive, but that was never implemented. So we now have a situation which goes from bad to worse. That's Pakistan's tragedy. And you know, it's a young country that 75% of the people are under 25 years of age. What are these generations going to learn? What does their experience teach them? That this country is just for the rich. This country is just for the religious orthodox. It's not for them.
Yes.
And I feel very sad about it.
Absolutely. And then how the things have unfolded, you know, with like, ideological and theological differences have always been there, you know, ever since, Islamic history, starting from like very early days, It's always been there. But in a constitution declaring a minority, first of all, what they did in 1974, they declared the Ahmadi Muslims as non-Muslims. But that didn't affect their daily life, day-to-day life as such. But the Qadiani ordinance, as they call it, of 1984, that is what made things go from bad to worse as far as the situation of Ahmadi Muslims is concerned. Looking at that, how do you see it? Isn't the persecution of Ahmadis, would you call it state-backed?
Well, I think it must have some backing from the state, otherwise the state would intervene to stop it. The state in Pakistan isn't weak. You have a military which is in power most of the time. You have police forces. Why don't they stop this violence? And the fact they don't is the same fact that the governor of the Punjab, Salman Taseer, was killed by his own bodyguards.
That's
That's
right.
why they can't, because this disease of sectarianism and fundamentalism has seeped into the police forces and the army, because the people at the top have been too weak to insist on this. And here I blame Musharraf too. Musharraf was not like that himself, but he did very little to stop all this. And so, leaving aside the misery of the everyday lives of minorities, you now have another crazy situation, contradictory situation. In the past, when I was young, and people would say, why is it that Muslims never win any Nobel Prizes for science? And we used to say Abdus Salam, one was the co-winner of the Nobel Prize for physics. So it's not true. A Muslim has won a Nobel Prize for physics, not for anything else, for physics, a
Absolutely.
very advanced science. Today, you can't make that statement in Pakistan because it's illegal.
Absolutely.
But you can say that in India, it's fine. You can say that in Europe, it's fine.
Yeah.
You can say that in the United States, in Africa, it's fine,
Yeah.
but not in Pakistan. And
Absolutely.
people don't see the absurdity of this.
Yeah, it's been taken out of textbooks and everything. And I mean, it's so surprising, especially for a state like Pakistan that desperately needs some heroes to celebrate, to inspire its younger generation. The ones that you have, you're trying to sort of disown them. So, now looking at the future, you've written some brilliant articles, and you've spoken when I've heard you speak at the Highgate Cemetery about the spring in the Arab world, in the Muslim world. Where do you see, looking at dialectics, where do you see Pakistan heading to?
I think that Pakistan is heading towards a disaster. If you look at what's going on in Karachi today, this is not a problem which is particularly a problem of minorities. This is a problem of political gangs linked to political parties fighting each other for supremacy in Karachi. Now, this is the country's largest city. And if this city is ungovernable, then it says a great deal for the rest of the country too. And it's become fashionable to say, Pakistan is very vibrant, we'll survive. The people are vibrant, it's true. But the governments and the elites which rule them are corrupt to the core. We have the most corrupt government we have ever had, which is in power in Pakistan today.
Absolutely.
So I have never been as depressed as I am today with the state of Pakistan. It's out of control. The elites don't care about anything. The army is discredited for having given away the country's sovereignty, incapable of preventing the Americans from bombing targets all over Pakistan. So it's a grim situation, and something quite unexpected might happen. I don't know what and I don't know when, but it's bound to happen.
Absolutely. Just one last question, Tariq Ali. Because when you look in the future, obviously you tend to think of what type of a government we might try, or what type of a governance can be given a go. But looking at the past, we've had all types of governments. We've had Ziaul Haq will not mention, because that was obviously, a pseudo-religious type of a, version of a government. We had Bhutto, who had a very liberal outlook. We had Musharraf, who had an ultra-liberal outlook. But both of them have bowed to the ultra-right wing. Why is that? So what type of a governance do you think can work then?
I think the only type of governance that can work in Pakistan is a government that actually says we are going to spend a lot of money educating our people, giving them a better standard of life, providing the basic necessities so that no one suffers unduly, and ending a situation where 60% of the children born in Pakistan are born moderately or severely stunted due to malnutrition. You start dealing with these basic problems where people feel that a government is doing something for them, and they will not be attracted to irrationalisms or irrational extremist ideologies. They are not even today, but even fewer of them would be. They would see some hope in their everyday lives. And that sort of government Pakistan has never had, and that is what we need if the country is going to move forward.
Absolutely. With that optimistic remark, I would like to thank you, Tariq Ali, for being with us today. Thanks a lot. Thank you very much.